Okay, Dennis. Let's talk about something that's not Tesla.
Uh, all right.
Ford.
Oh no.
So you know how I hate myself and find the need to constantly fix misconceptions on Twitter and just incorrect information.
I mean, no one asked you to.
No one asked me to, but I just feel like I'm obligated. I just somehow I am obligated to fix inaccurate information because I can't just allow people to just continue to spread false information, right? So some of the stuff that has been popping up more and more and more as we come closer is Mustang Mach-E misinformation.
Oh
There's just
yeah.
so much of it.
Such as.
I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot. We can start with infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
One of the more common statements is that Ford doesn't have chargers and Tesla's superior because of the supercharger network.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true. Is that true? Is that true to you?
Well, Ford doesn't have its own Ford branded charging
Correct.
network.
Correct. Ford does not have its own branded charging network. See, Ford went out of their way to say that they have the largest charging network, and that's really what ticked people off.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't have their own charging network. They have a group of other third party companies that collaborate together.
Yes. To
But
form
combined, it is the largest charging network.
some. Well, I'm sure if we're being really, semantic, you could say that a Tesla owner with applicable adapters would have access to the largest charging network because they'll be able to charge at all those
No,
Ford
no, 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 no,
chargers
no,
plus
no, 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 no,
superchargers.
no. See, because the reason that everyone argues against third party use is because there's so many of them. And because each one has their own payment platform or subscription program or app, and you have to, if you have a Chevy Bolt, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to travel, you need to sign up for 10 different subscription programs. You need to find like 40 different apps because
Mm-hmm.
there's no simple plug in, pay, and leave like
Mm-hmm.
Tesla has. That's Tesla's advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone argues, oh, it doesn't matter how big these third parties get as long as Tesla beats any one of them, they're the largest. Together, it's meaningless because you need to separate yourself for each individual one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where this misconception comes because that's not what Ford Mustang Mach-E owners will do. When Ford says that they have the largest charging network, it wasn't just slapping 20 of them together or so. They they actually collaborated with them and built in all the payments, all the charge rate, all the statuses into their car and into their app.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the exact same thing as if I have a Tesla. I
Mm-hmm.
just go to a charger that's part of Ford's network, which will show in the car, plug in, my car is billed, and I leave.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't see a difference between that and a Tesla supercharger, do you?
Um, Tesla superchargers look cooler.
I'll argue that Ford superchargers look identical and they copied them. I don't know if you forgot that. The Ford dealership chargers are straight copies of the Tesla supercharger, but
Well,
blue.
then Tesla on top of looking cool gets the the benefit of being the OG. So,
From a
uh,
consumer standpoint, it makes no difference. Yes, as a company, Ford does not have their own infrastructure. You can't give points, financial points to Ford when Tesla does have their own infrastructure and they are making that money and Ford's not.
mm-hmm.
But from a consumer standpoint, it makes no difference. Tesla no longer has the upper hand with infrastructure, at least not against a company that, like Ford, that has combined all of the third party networks to make their own collaborative network.
Well, maybe there's the threat that that umbrella of chargers will eventually not, will eventually maybe disband. I mean, I don't know the specifics of the agreements they have, but I'm sure there's some sort of, end date to it, perhaps. So is the fact that Tesla will always own their own supercharger network versus Ford kind of leasing out multiple chargers to them, is a threat that eventually Ford might not have that umbrella of charging networks and you will have to go back to having 50 different apps to deal with the 10 different charging networks.
Yeah, but now you're creating an argument I've never heard before. So this
I,
isn't really.
I am. I mean, that's what I do. I gotta
And
come.
if we get into that, I don't think that will ever happen because I think that third party collaboration will be the end goal of all of these companies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even EVBox,
Mm-hmm.
they're creating a collaborative software, so every charger can use a software standard
Mm-hmm.
to accept the same payment methods and everything. So now all of third party will end up being collaborative, whether it be individualized through manufacturers or through their own alliances, because they are also in a lot of alliances.
Mm-hmm.
All you need is someone like ChargePoint and Blink going, hey, we're going to use the same software, and now bam, you can use both the same way.
Right.
So what's something else? What are you seeing? What misconception are you seeing that you want to fix?
I don't know. You're the one that's been crusading against Ford misconception the past couple weeks. So
the one that I love is the Ford's not trying. They don't actually care that this is just a compliance car. As someone who has a vendetta against compliance cars, Dennis, how do you feel about that statement? Is the Mach-E a compliance car?
Well, I feel like the definition of compliance car has kind of evolved. Initially, compliance car was just like, hey, here's the regular Ford Focus. Let's just throw a battery in it. We're not going to change anything about it there. And then we'll make like 5,000 of them or whatever to appease like California or the European laws or whatever. It looks like that concept has died, hopefully forever, I hope.
There's still a few cars that are only available in certain states.
Well, no, we're not there yet. I mean more so like we took an existing gas car, changed basically nothing about it, and we just threw electric components in it. They're not EV originals or whatever. They're basically not their own models. That's basically more or less has died, and now people are developing actual electric cars from the ground up and whatnot. So now the new, more evolved definition of compliance cars, like you said, where they're either made in supremely low volumes or they're not, or because they're made in such low volumes, you can't even get them everywhere. So something like, for instance, the BMW iX3 by some could be defined as a compliance car because it's not available in America. It's only available in, China and eventually Europe. Something like the new Kia Soul EV, even though it's a very competent electric car, not made in volumes to reach America yet, and there's supply issues, and they're not made in large volumes. Same with the Kona EV as well as the Niro EV. Whether that's because the companies actually intend there to be low volumes or there's some issues of manufacturing, and they're still coming out in low volumes. So those vehicles, by some definitions, might be considered compliance cars. So the Mach-E is from, I would say, it's its own model. Even though it's a Mustang Mach-E, it's not an existing Ford vehicle that has electric components in it. So we can cross that definition of compliance cars out. And they want, at least for the first year, it was 50,000 cars, which I think is a respectable amount of vehicles. Probably some would say not a lot considering how many vehicles Ford makes in general, but it's not, 5,000 cars, 10,000 cars, and only available in 10 different states. That being said, the production of them and the deliveries of them is not off to the greatest of starts, so we don't know if they will hit their 50,000 car goal for the year. As my boy Gio said, they delivered three cars in 2020, which is, like I said, not off to a good start. So, if they only end up ever making 5,000, 10,000 cars for the year, then, you could maybe make the argument it's a compliance car. But if they reach their production goals, I think you can't really call it a compliance
I think
car.
even if they fall behind, you can't fault them for it. But I should note their 50,000 expectation is due to battery constraints,
Mm-hmm.
and they sold out 50,000 according to them.
According to them. Plus, they've been, the original Fiat 500e was a good definition of a compliance car. They just took the 500, they put a battery in it, jacked up the price, and the CEO himself said, "Don't buy the car. We lose money on it. Please just, we don't want you to buy the car." Ford has been putting in effort into the Mach-E. It's not something that they just made and they're just like, if it does well, it does well. If it doesn't do it, it doesn't do well. We've seen countless statements by the CEO and different management about how what the importance of this car is, different video documentaries that they're trying to appease to the existing Mustang crowd, where they try to really enforce that this is deserving of the Mustang name and is a good new chapter for the company. So outside of the car itself, there's effort being put around it. Like you said, they went through the effort of getting the charging networks to combine and make it easy ownership. They're going through the dealers and making sure they're certified to sell in maintenance electric cars. So there's effort being put into it. So I don't think you can really logically say that the Mach-E is a compliance car.
And you also can't logically say that Ford's not actually trying here.
Well,
let me ask you a few simple yes or no questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in regards to whether or not these statements imply that Ford is actually trying with the Mach-E. Okay, would Ford have spent billions of dollars on this car if they weren't trying? I mean, I don't know if you know what $1 billion is. If you don't, I have a Tom Scott video to show you.
Probably not.
Do you think Ford would have degraded themselves and slapped their most valuable namesake on something that could have backlashed horribly and did if they weren't trying?
I would hope not.
Do you think they'd spend millions of dollars in advertising on a car they don't care to sell?
No.
The list just goes on.
I
think they're trying.
Mm-hmm.
People argue, but the battery's low, the specs are bad. Being behind Tesla, being a couple years behind in technology, does not mean you're not trying. Tesla was at sub 300 miles of range too just a few years ago.
I think, I was thinking about this, and it feels like people, when Tesla came out, obviously they were the underdog. There's really no question about it. They were, who were they? There's a startup trying to make electric cars in a world that was like, what are electric cars? Don't make me laugh. So people had to feel very passionate about Tesla because they obviously had to defend any EV misconceptions and try to, tell people about the good parts about having an electric car and so on and so forth. So they really harbored this loyalty to the company because they were so much smaller than everyone else. But clearly Tesla has grown exponentially since 2012. They are now valued more than every other automaker combined, have brand recognition that rivals the most storied brands in the world, and are doing like 50 things at once. I wouldn't really call that an underdog anymore, but people still in the community view it as an underdog, so they feel very, I don't know, very adamant about defending a company that I don't think needs to be defended anymore. Tesla's a big boy now, but it feels like most people in the community still view Tesla as an underdog. Is that something that you would agree with?
Yeah, but I don't think that justifies.
No, I'm not saying it justifies. I'm just saying that that's the reasoning I'm seeing for why people seem to be hostile towards something coming from legacy automakers, because only half a decade ago the legacy automakers were the big boys and Tesla was the underdog. But now, if EVs are indeed the future transportation, then Tesla is now the biggest boy, and everyone else is an underdog coming in for electric cars. But people are still, coming from the angle that Tesla is, below every other legacy automaker, and they need to be defended at every point. At least that's how I'm seeing it, as an explanation for this hostility.
Yeah, but they're not really defending Tesla as an underdog. They're defending Tesla as the leader.
Mm.
They're not really saying, oh, Tesla can easily catch up to Ford. They're saying Ford is behind Tesla.
No, I'm just saying that this habit of,
always defending.
Yeah. Has continued, even though Tesla has surpassed everyone else in terms of electric cars. I mean, obviously, electric cars, from a numbers standpoint, are still an underdog. I'm not going to sit, it's still 1%, 2% of the global cars. So there's still, it's still a mountain to climb. But in the electric car space, Tesla is the dominant company. So I don't really think people need to be so, come to their defense anytime someone else tries to make an electric car.
See, I think it's easy for them to do so because of all the other electric cars we've had. Mm-hmm. Forever, there was really no question between a Tesla and another EV.
Yes.
I mean, even if you preferred a Nissan Leaf,
mm-hmm.
everyone around you questioned why you preferred a Nissan Leaf. Like, there was no doubt the Tesla made the superior car. It had better specs, it had better range, it had better technology, it was future-proof. The only thing you could argue is the design choices. Mm-hmm. But on paper, Tesla beat every single car.
Mm-hmm.
So they all have this, like, this idea that going into the Mach-E and any new car that it's just like, oh, this is just another one.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't really hit their mind that they're like, oh, this company is actually not that far behind Tesla, because no one's arguing that the Mach-E is on par with Tesla. But I will argue that the Mach-E is number 2.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of EVs we have today, in terms of future-proof, in terms of technology, and even specs, I will argue that the Mach-E sits at number 2.
Well, we always have to remember that probably 95% of the people that, view those, that make those comments and just from the outset say that the Mach-E is not, or any other new EV is not a good car, their experience stops at the spec sheet. They read the specs and that's it. That's
a silly statement.
That's where the car ends for them. So whatever other intangibles the car could have, whether how it drives, how responsive its user interface can be, how the seats, if they hug you or not, that doesn't matter for the majority of people. Because, I mean, how many people are actually going to go into the Ford dealership, look at the Mach-E, sit in the Mach-E, and test drive it to actually form a genuine opinion about the car? Most people's basic, is this car better than a Tesla, looks at the spec sheet, looks at maybe the options, maybe they'll go.
You need to point out that this isn't most people, this is most people who are making these arguments.
Yes.
Because the average person drives a Toyota Camry.
Right.
And a Toyota Camry doesn't look pretty on any spec sheet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, its price does.
So, from a consumer standpoint, the Mach-E is bound to sell very well.
You would hope.
Not everyone is stuck on that spec sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone cares about the 0 to 60 time. I'll argue the majority of people don't care about the 0 to 60 time. The majority of people don't care about the top speed. What people do care about is the range, and the range is lower. But it's lower, but not low enough to argue against it. I mean, we were both on the same page of range not being too important. I would love a 200-mile range Tesla that costs $5,000 less than our current.
Yeah.
And we're both on that same page. 200, 300 miles is more than plenty for the average driver.
Speaking of, 0 to 60s and top speeds not being that important, Porsche just announced the regular Taycan. It's more or less exactly the same car, except it's slower.
It's now on par with the Model 3. The $35,000 Model 3 has the same specs as the $80-something thousand Porsche Taycan, but that's not a comparison you can make.
Yeah.
The $35,000 Model 3 also has the same specs as a Rolls-Royce. That's also not a comparison you can make.
But so, yeah.
Going back to Ford, we keep getting sidetracked here. Okay, let's fix some more misconceptions. Software is a big one. Tesla, obviously, their software, the greatest, right? At least presently in the auto world. Like, who else has Solitaire other than the Chrysler Pacifica?
Who got Cuphead? No one.
No one has Cuphead. Who has controller support? No one. Netflix? No one.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's all these arguments. Oh, but this is just a dated car. This isn't future proof. I can't watch Netflix. Boring. Dull car. See, what people don't know, and I know they don't know because the statement made is, oh, Ford doesn't have __. The underscore here is OTA, over-the-air software updates. The Mustang Mach-E does have over-the-air software updates. Do we know what they'll do? No, not yet. The I-Pace was set to have over-the-air software updates, but the only thing we saw out of that was bug fixes in the year that it's been out. Has it been 2 years already?
Yeah.
We only saw bug fixes. So that's another thing where you come in with this preconceived notion that, oh, but it's just going to be boring stuff, right?
Mm.
And part of my opinion here is hope that Ford doesn't fall in that train. But from what we do know is that Ford is planning on adding, I don't even know what level it is, like level 2 autonomy features through OTA.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing announced is pretty significant.
Right, but
So I'd imagine there'll be a few more things, but Ford does have OTA. So the car, in the sense, is future-proof. Its interface is the best Ford has to offer. The only other car with it is the F-150.
Mm-hmm.
And in regards to autonomy, that's the other thing. Oh, but Ford doesn't have autopilot. Well, again, through OTA, Ford is going to introduce their own autopilot competitor. Is it full self-driving? No, of course not. Tesla still has the lead there.
Mm-hmm.
But Ford does they own or do they have a stake in Argo?
Stake with Volkswagen.
They have a stake in Argo AI. So to just assume that full self-driving is never going to become reality for Ford is kind of silly as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have all these other third-party companies like Waymo that all they have to do is license from Waymo and then done. They have autonomous features. Tesla's not the only one with autonomous features. I hate to break it to you guys, but robotaxis exist today, not in Elon Musk's future. Waymo has robotaxis on the road, localized, pre-mapped today. I can get in a self-driving Uber today. Well, not Uber, but self-driving Waymo today.
Right. You know how you can fix this? If Jim Farley starts posting memes on his Twitter.
That adds another thing. Jim Farley's constantly praising the Mach-E and how well they've done and talking about all the awards they're winning. If they didn't care, would they be showing that? Because again, the Fiat CEO said, "Don't buy the Fiat 500e." Ford's put a lot into this car, and I think a lot will come from this car. I think they're number 2. I don't think you can argue whether or not it's better than. I don't think that you can argue that it is better than Tesla. At least not biasly.
Well, then most people will ask why you even going through this effort if you yourself say that the Tesla is an option.
Again, the average person drives a Toyota Camry. The average person does not drive a Model 3. Mm-hmm. The average person drives a Ford Focus, not a Model 3. Mm-hmm. These are mass-produced cars where the average person does not care what the spec sheet says. Of course, a Ferrari is better than a Toyota Camry. Does that mean a Ferrari will outsell a Toyota Camry? No. Tesla still has this bridge to pass where they have to reach more of the mass consumers. 500,000 cars a year doesn't cut it in a country that does 17 million cars a year. Mm-hmm. Ford already sells a large portion of that 17 million cars. I think they did upwards of 3 million cars last year. So, since it's always compared with the Model Y because they both are in the electric crossover segment. Mm-hmm. And again, there really is no other person up there next to the Model Y other than the Mach-E. The big
Mm-hmm.
one is price.
Right.
Oh, but the Model Y is cheaper. It's not. It's not. The Ford qualifies for the $7,500 tax credit, making it significantly more affordable than the Tesla. Its residuals are slightly better on leases. It's simply, that's just factually, it is not more expensive than a Model Y. It is more affordable than a Model Y. So yeah, you're cutting down range. Yeah, you're cutting down specs. You're cutting down performance, but you also have a more affordable car. Even the Mach-E GT is like $7,000 less than the performance Model Y.
Woof. Well, I don't know. I don't know what to say. Uh, the car hasn't really come out yet. I don't know. Maybe it will take more owners. I mean, auto journalists have had their reviews, but I don't know how much weight people put in on auto journalists' reviews. So, Tesla really succeeded based on owners giving their stories. So maybe when the Mach-E comes in more stories, I mean, comes into more owners' hands, and maybe those owners have friends that own Teslas, and then those Tesla owners can have a ride in a Mach-E. Maybe the sentiment towards it will shift a little bit if the car is as great as it is predicted to be. But the car's not really out on the road yet. It's in trucks in Kansas or something, on trains, and not in owners' hands. So it doesn't really have that much visibility in terms of social media and people exalting any benefits that the Mach-E has.
The problem here is that the car's not out on the road yet, like you just said.
Mm-hmm.
So these misconceptions are just being cycled through this EV community,
Mm-hmm.
but in turn will spread, and you're just speaking negative facts on a car that hasn't even begun to sell yet. So
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of degrading it and making it harder to sell.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Well,
okay to be wrong.
we'll see. I mean, if 2022 comes and Ford only manages to sell 5,000 Mach-E's, you're going to look a bit silly.
Mm-hmm.
So we will revisit that. But if sentiment grows and Ford can hit their 50,000 or whatever the world allows the facilities to produce, if they hit their goals and people like the car, then you're gonna look like a smart cookie. So we'll have to revisit in maybe half a year's time how this is proceeding.